Hello everyone, this is Brother Rob Montgomery, and I just want to welcome you to another episode of Through the Psalms. Today we're looking at Psalms chapter 15. Before I get going, I want to let you know I'm have my partner here with me, Brother Jacob Schuler, that's going to go through this psalm with us. And we're standing on the property for the Church of God, what will be our future home of our assembly tabernacle. It's pretty awesome to be here for this particular psalm and just to bring this lesson to you today, and hope it's a blessing to you. It's great to be out here, isn't it?
It is. Hey, I really appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's awesome to just imagine that we own this property as the church, and someday we'll be here every assembly.
Yes.
This is behind us is where we did the dedication service. It was a spectacular event, something for the history books.
Right.
And you know, I'll share with my kids and grandkids through the years. But what a great way to start the morning, brother, to be out here on this property, to read the Psalms, and to just talk about God's Word. But let's look at Psalm 15. There's only 5 verses here, but I think it's a powerful, beautiful psalm. It starts off in verse 1. It says, "Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill?" And the first thing I see here when I read this is, I love how David, as he talks to the Lord, you see him asking questions.
Right.
He's not afraid to ask questions.
Right.
You know, prayer, a lot of times we think of just...
Make our petitions known.
Yeah, just asking about our needs. But
right.
Here he's just having a conversation with God.
Right.
And I don't know about you. Do you ask God questions when you pray?
I do, I do now, because I realize that earthly relationships don't fare that well when all I do when I talk to somebody is let them know that I'm needy, So I thought,
Yeah.
you know what? Why do we do that to the Lord?
And what an interesting question, right? I've read some Psalms earlier in the first 14 where David's asking about specific needs, but here he's saying, Lord, who's going to be with you? And what's interesting about this first verse here, the words abide versus dwell, as I was studying that out, abide means to just kind of turn aside from the road or stop over, almost like you're walking along and you decide, okay, I think I'm going to pull over here. And then dwell means I'm actually going to stay there. So he's kind of asking, Lord, who's going to stop and just take a look at thy tabernacle? Of course, we're calling this area the area where the assembly tabernacle will be.
Right.
That word has a special meaning.
It does.
Because it represents God's dwelling place.
Mm-hmm.
And, are we saying the General Assembly is the only place God is? That's not what we're saying,
No.
but we are saying it is a special place to meet God, that's for sure.
Yes.
Verse 2 says, he starts to answer the question. He says, "He that walketh uprightly and worketh righteousness and speaketh the truth in his heart." And I don't know if you catch this, in all these verses you're going to see this ETH pop up.
Yeah.
And as I've studied that out, that means like a continual thing. It's not just a one-time thing.
One and done.
Yeah, so the person that's going to actually stop and pay attention where God is and actually stay with him is the one that's continually walking upright, which means wholesome, with integrity, innocent, perfect. We're striving for perfection. That's something we preach about in the church a lot. And we could spend a whole lesson on that topic, couldn't we?
Sure.
Worketh righteousness. It says, speaketh the truth in his heart. And, I think about that verse that says, out of the heart, the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh, right? And that we shouldn't have sweet and bitter
Flown from the same
fountain, right? So, what we want from that heart is truth. And if you could look up John 14:6 for me and read that verse.
All right.
Because he says, he that speaketh truth in his heart.
Right. Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man can cometh unto the Father but by me.
So we see Jesus is the truth, right?
Right.
Look at John 17:17 for me.
Okay. Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth.
It's not complicated, is it?
Right.
That we need Jesus, we
Exactly.
need his word.
Yes.
Get that in our hearts, and
right.
guess what flows out?
That's right. And how could the psalmist David know that would be the end goal, if you will, or the remedy to it all?
Yeah.
But he was inspired to say this.
He was inspired to say it. not knowing that one day it would be pointing directly to Jesus.
Yes.
And to the Word, which Jesus is the Word.
Is
by
the
way.
Word, yep. Mm-hmm.
So prophetic without even realizing he was.
Right.
He goes on to say in verse 3 here, this is where it gets a little personal. He that backbiteth not with his tongue.
Yeah.
Right? I was telling Brother Jacob this morning, I love this psalm. It gets personal though, because it starts talking about the words you use.
Yeah.
And that gets me, Lord help me with my tongue. But the interesting thing here, this word backbiteth, the actual definition is to go on foot and spy out with the intent to slander.
Right.
So in other words, you're striving to, it's okay to, I think maybe share a prayer request or say, hey,
Right.
did you see this brother? He looked down or he looks like he's struggling. But to actually go get info to talk bad about someone.
Right. Ammunition is what we call
Ammunition,
it today.
that's right. That's not, and he's saying the person that doesn't do that is the person that's going to dwell with the Lord.
Right.
Nor doeth evil to his neighbor. And of course, the great commandment says we're supposed to do what to our neighbors? To love them,
Oh, yeah,
right?
we're supposed to love our neighbors.
Yeah, so
As
as ourselves.
yeah.
So we're not doing evil to them, we're loving them, nor taketh up a reproach against his neighbor. And this word reproach is something shameful. We see this in, a good example of this word is Nehemiah 2:17. I'll just read that real quick. It says, then said I unto them, ye see the distress that we're in, how Jerusalem lieth waste, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come, let us build up the wall of Jerusalem, that would be no more a reproach. In other words, their city was tore down.
Right.
It was in ruins, and they're calling that a reproach, as it's shameful the condition we're in.
Sure.
And so David's saying here, the one that dwells with God is going to be the one that doesn't carry. If someone's had a shameful thing happen to them,
Right.
you don't just keep carrying that around.
Yeah.
You forgive them, you forget.
Right.
And you pick people up and say, hey, walk with me.
Right.
Man, there's so much in here. I love that. But let's just keep going here. Verse 4 says, in whose eyes a vile person is contemned, but he honoreth them that fear the Lord. So what I wrote down here is this first part deals with judging people properly. It says a vile person is contemned. In other words, you see a negative situation, or you properly see evil and you recognize that. You don't rejoice in that.
Right.
But you're, like Romans says, that we don't take pleasure in the works of unrighteousness.
Right.
It says, he that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. That's an interesting phrase.
Yeah, it is.
But he's saying, to me, that's just someone that you keep your word.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if you made kind of a rash vow,
Yeah.
My wife's on to me about that all the time,
Yeah, be careful, right?
You said you would do it.
Yeah.
When you commit to something, and maybe it's to an elderly church member, and I look at the clock, I'm like, oh man, this took way longer than I thought, and I still got to go whatever I said I would do.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll call them and reschedule, and she said, you said you would go.
Yeah. and what we're talking about here is who's going to be staying with God.
Right.
Because God keeps his word.
He does.
If he says he's going to do it, he's going to
And he
do
expects
it.
us to.
That's right. The last verse here, he that putteth not out his money to usury, nor taketh reward against the innocent. In other words, don't loan with interest.
Yeah.
The scriptures tell us Jesus actually said to give, not expecting to return.
Right.
And the Lord was it's interesting, the Lord, and you were in the banking industry for a while, which thrives on
That's how they make their money.
making money off interest, right?
That's right. They'll pay you a little bit of interest, but when they lend your money out, it's with a lot of interest.
Yeah,
That's how
so-
they make their margins.
But the Lord was clear in Exodus and Deuteronomy. If we were to have time, I would encourage folks to read Exodus 22, verse 25, and Deuteronomy 23:19. God was very, and in fact, especially if you were lending to the poor, he
Right.
did not want you charging them interest at all. Just give them what they need to help them. And he expected repayment, but he didn't want you to gain off of their need.
Right.
So,
off of their situation.
yeah, I thought that was interesting. But I love how this psalm ends. It says, he that doeth these things shall never be moved. That's
Love it.
powerful, isn't it?
What an encouragement.
Yeah, and that's David saying that long before
Grace.
grace,
Yeah.
long before the blessings that come with knowing Christ as our Savior. I'm reminded of 1 Peter, or maybe 2 Peter, where it says, if you do these things, you'll never fall by adding to your faith all these things. So
Yes.
here's David saying, hey, if you do this, you'll never be moved. That sounds like someone that's solid.
Right.
And so we hope this is a blessing to you today, and you gain some encouragement from Psalm 15. And may you be blessed as you read through the Psalms.